Bombshell tonight. The last known footage of Nancy Guthrie. Does it reveal the killer's ID? This as the Nancy Guthrie killer's route revealed.
The last known footage of Nancy Guthrie may have just changed the entire investigation. According to new reports discussed by Nancy Grace, investigators have obtained surveillance footage believed to show Nancy inside an Uber just one day before she vanished from her Arizona home. The video has reportedly been turned over to the FBI and is now considered one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. Nancy Grace described the case as something she had never seen anything like before. As investigators continue analyzing footage, blood evidence, and surveillance connected to the disappearance. Authorities say 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was last seen the night of January 31st before disappearing under suspicious circumstances from her Tucson area home. The FBI has since released footage showing an armed individual tampering with cameras outside the residence. Now, months later, investigators believe this final ride may hold the key to uncovering what really happened. And the biggest question still remains: who was watching Nancy Guthrie before she disappeared?
In this case, no one, until a few days ago, has been looking at around that Uber delivery, that Uber drive. So what, if anything, can we learn, Joe Scott Morgan?
Well, certainly directionality. What route was taken, and also, look, as an old investigator, I want to know as much as I possibly can about the driver. That they have an awareness of her, maybe who she is, this sort of thing. Were they followed in any way? I think, and so any kind of players that might be involved in this peripheral. Look, we'll take anything, right? We'll take absolutely anything relative to the data that can be sourced. Where did this individual go before? Okay, he picked up Mrs. Guthrie. Where did he go after he picked up Mrs. Guthrie? I want to know everything about it in granular detail, Nancy.
From what we can tell, there was intense planning of the kidnap of Mrs. Guthrie. So what we're getting at is when he picked up Mrs. Guthrie to take her to Annie's, we have reason to believe the perp was already in the neighborhood, positioned, waiting. Straight out to Cheryl McCollum joining us, Cold Case Investigative Research Institute founder. She is also a crime scene investigator, and she is the star of a hit podcast, Zone 7. She's the author of a brand new book, Swans Don't Swim in a Sewer, Solving the Cold Case of the Flint River Killer's Daughter. Amazing book, by the way. Cheryl McCollum, thank you for being with us. We have reason to believe that if when you don't know a horse, Cheryl McCollum, you look at his track record. We already know that Miss Guthrie's kidnapper was there on January 11. He's caught on video and very likely there on previous occasions. He was in that neighborhood and poised with his accomplice when Mrs. Guthrie was first picked up and taken to Annie Guthrie's. Many people believe he may have already gotten into her place before Mrs. Guthrie returned home that night.
Nancy, I want to go back to the car first. When I first get to a scene and I get out of my car, I take photographs up and down the street. The reason is I don't know what cars belong there and what don't. I don't know who parks on the street normally, who's in a driveway, etc. They can go back with that Tesla video and see if there's somebody parked on the side of the road, if there's somebody parked in a driveway that doesn't belong. This person we know cased out her home before. You already mentioned the 11th. We think, again on the 20-something and then on the 30th. This person cased it. They knew her, comings and goings. They knew what she looked like. On this night, they, I believe, were laying in wait. I think they know exactly when she got home. And that's why you see him going back to the front door after all the lights are out and he thinks she's sound asleep.
Cheryl. Guys, joining me in addition to Joe Scott Morgan, Cheryl McCollum is with us, the star of Zone 7 podcast. Cheryl, how many cases did you and I work together in inner city Atlanta and Fulton County? I mean, can we even count them? I can't.
Thousands.
Yeah, it's hard when I look back to count the numbers. 100, 150 brand new felonies a week times 4, that's a month, times 12, times 10 years plus. That's a lot of cases. So, Cheryl, is there anything new under the sun? Defendants do the same thing over and over and over. They can't help themselves. Like, think about it. Everybody listening right now, do you brush your teeth the same way, at the same time, every morning, in the same order? Do you wash your clothes a certain way? Do you get somewhere in your car and go, oh my goodness, I don't even remember getting here. I must have zoned out. People do the same things over and over and over. It's like it's muscle memory. So what I'm saying, Cheryl, we know this guy, the perp, one of them anyway, because I believe there had to be at least 2 involved. We know this guy lay in wait before. We know he cased the scene more than once. So he was very high on preparation, getting there ahead of time. What would be any different this time? It's like every time a dog sits down, it circles 3 times. You know he was in that neighborhood, which makes it very important to review the video from the Uber driver that picked up Mrs. Guthrie that night. And also, Cheryl McCollum, a lot has been made about the daughter, Annie Guthrie, and brother-in-law of Savannah Guthrie, their car being impounded, and why it took so long. How do I know it didn't have 360 nav, just like a Tesla? Remember what we learned in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial and the murders of his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul? His SUV, it was a big honking like a Wagoneer or something, revealed so much data. When he took off from the crime scene that night, scratching off, when he slowed down his vehicle, let the passenger window down electronically, yes, the black box of his car showed that, threw out Maggie's cell phone and then scratched off to hide out at his mother's house. Remember all that? So much we can learn. So Cheryl, yeah, so while their vehicle was in impound, how do I know they weren't looking at that?
They should have been. They not only should be looking at any type of data that could come from the car, whether it's video or from the black box. Did that car move after 9 o'clock? They would know that. And that's why it's critical when you're ruling people in and ruling them out. Go through all of it in order to truly rule somebody out. The data from that phone, the data from the car, it's going to tell the story. That's not something they can manipulate. The Uber driver the same way. If he were to put his phone on airplane mode, that black box in that car is still operational and still telling us whether it's rolling forward, in park, the trunk opens, the passenger door opens. We will know all of it.
Back to you, Joe Scott Morgan, you and I believe Cheryl and Fitz were talking at the very, very beginning when Miss Guthrie went missing about the importance, the critical nature of vehicles in this case, and now it's coming true.
We absolutely were, because she's dependent, I think, to a great degree upon people moving her about. And so our vehicles are so tied to what our identity is and how we move about, and also where we are at any given time. So I think that this could be one of the keys that's going to unlock this. We can talk about physical evidence all you want to, but the big piece to this is her movement, because that's essential, Nancy. And one of the big questions we've always had: how did she get into the house, out of the house? Was she conveyed in any way? What's being implied here? So all of the actors that at least the police have revealed to this point are going to play a role in this, trying to create this timeline. And hopefully, Nancy, and it's rather grim, but where is she? I think is a big part to this as well. And that's a question that we all want to know, right? We want to know who the perp is, but we want to know where she is in her current status, Nancy.
Well, again, a track record. How many cases have been busted by vehicles? And all we need is one clue about the vehicle. I mean, think it through. Let's take a look, just for the fun of it, at Brian Kohberger's white Elantra zipping around the neighborhood, caught on one cam after the next, after the next. Yep. And it wasn't just Brian Kohberger. Do I have to say Molly Tibbetts? As you will recall, Cheryl McCollum, star of Zone 7, Cheryl McCollum, in the Molly Tibbetts case, the perp was unknown to her. There was no connection, which made the case even more difficult to crack. It was like a needle in a haystack until video emerged of the killer's car going back and forth and back and forth. And then you see Molly Tibbetts come into the frame. And the person, the perp, is talking to her, trying to get her in the car. She threatens to call 911. What was interesting about that vehicle, it had distinct markings along the side of it, and that is how the killer was caught. And we've seen it play out over and over again. In the case of the glam yoga teacher, Caitlin Armstrong, her SUV, let's take a look at that, was spotted going round and around and around the murder scene just before a world-class female dirt bike racer was murdered. Over what? A man. Because her boyfriend, Caitlin Armstrong's boyfriend, had a hamburger with the victim. So what's her logical action? Kill her. That video cracked the case. So in this case, straight out to Brian Fitzgibbons joining us, Director of Operations, USPA Nationwide Security, leading a team of investigators around the world, finding and extracting missing people. He's also a former Marine and Iraqi war vet. Brian, this vehicle, I understand that new eyes are now looking at video for parked cars, for people walking, not just on the night of the abduction, but before that, because we know the kidnapper was there ahead of time. That is his MO, modus operandi, method of operation. So what could the Uber driver's car reveal, depending on what kind of car it is?
I think you and Joe Scott Morgan hit the nail on the head just earlier there, that what's in the background and the periphery of that video. So on top of establishing that Mrs. Guthrie was coherent, in a good state while she was in that ride, there might be other things that we can see. Was there a vehicle spotted on a front-facing camera? Some of these Ubers have not only rear-facing passenger cameras, but they could have front-facing cameras as well, operating at the same time. And I'll add one piece here. There are still thousands of hours of video collected from both public and private sources that review is ongoing and a very tedious effort. But what they're focusing on is trying to find a vehicle in the right space and right time that can lead to be further investigated.
Now, we know, moving beyond the Uber driver that picked up Nancy Guthrie that night, a lot has been made to you, Joe Scott Morgan, about Annie Guthrie and her husband's vehicle. We know that it was a blue Honda CRV, and Hondas, CRV specifically, do have nav system depending on the trim level you get on the car. Now, what does that mean? And what, if anything, can we learn from that? Because he, the son-in-law, brings Nancy home, and you know the killer was somewhere in the area when she was brought home.
When we're thinking about her delivery back home, who exactly is out there watching? Because Nancy, as I've held all along, and I think this is kind of obvious, but this is a targeted attack. They knew her. They knew who she was. They knew her comings and goings. And here's the thing. They knew that she's vulnerable. And so they're going to spring whenever they see that her guard is down. We're talking about kind of late at night. She's barely ambulatory. She's worn out. She's been with her family at this point in time. They know she's going to turn in for bed, Nancy. It's been a long day, right? And so they're observing, they're waiting, they're watching. Now, what are they waiting for exactly? Because, that's a bigger question, thinking about, why out of all the people in the world would they want to go after this poor woman? Well, I mean, I have my own thoughts about that relative to they know who her daughter is. I think everybody's going to know that's involved in this. And so they've targeted her, right? And so they're going to wait until they can spring their trap. And the question is, where did they put their vehicle to transport her off? And back to what Brian had said, this idea of going through all of this videography is going to be key to try to determine where another vehicle may have come and introduced themselves or itself into this equation, this visual equation that we're trying to figure out at this point in time. That's going to be critical. And look, I don't know who's looking at the video. I'm assuming it's probably the feds. I hope it's the feds, and that they're going to try to break this down into the base elements, because nothing, and I mean nothing, Nancy, at this point in time is off the table. Everybody has to be considered. And, as my grandpa used to say, let the hide come with the hair. I don't care who it impacts relative to the evidence, relative to a vehicle. Check it out. Go out there, look for these individuals, put them up against the wall, talk to them about it. Let's find out, why were you there during that night? I'm hoping that they've done it to this point. I'm hoping that they're continuing to do it, because you have to press in any investigation. As we well know, time is a precious commodity in this case.
So tonight, in addition to a review of video footage from not only that Uber driver, but from Annie Guthrie's vehicle, to determine not just what was Mrs. Guthrie wearing, what was her demeanor, did she look ill, was she concerned? Not just that, looking for the vehicle, and that is going to require a lot of enhancement of the video. God willing, the video is still there. We also learned that fresh eyes are reviewing the evidence from the feds. Not only is that video being reviewed as we go to air, we learn that Annie Guthrie herself provided the route she believes the killer used that night. Let's take a look at it. Straight out to Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter. What is this? Where did it come from?
This actually, Annie Guthrie was in a group chat online with neighbors and sent this map to them at the beginning of the investigation, Nancy. This was put out there early, hoping that somebody might have seen something or had video along, you see the blue map line there, that somebody along that way could look through their video. I mean, this is really an incredible source of information from Annie Guthrie, coming up with what she thought was the plan, or the route rather, taken by on the way home. So they're looking for anyone along this pathway, that might have seen something. It's curious when you really get into this that she's marked different addresses along the way. It's just an incredible piece of information that Annie Guthrie offered to this group with neighbors talking about the area.
If this route is real, if this is the route the killer took, straight out to you, Cheryl McCollum, joining us, crime scene investigator of many years, author of a brand new book, and star of Zone 7. Okay, what do we do with it? This is the route that Annie Guthrie is allegedly convinced the killer used. It's full of evidence.
Nancy, when you're looking at this map and you see all the places, the nail salon, I mean, you've got tons of businesses, you've got residential areas. I would not, number one, I would not limit my investigation to this map, but I would certainly go through it based on what her daughter believes could be a route. We are over 80 days into this thing, and we don't have a legitimate video of a vehicle. You've got to ask yourself why. How is that possible with all of these intersections that we know have cameras, the gas stations, the churches, the businesses? How do we not have a vehicle? Well, Nancy, as you know, I was out there, and here's what I can tell you. At any given point almost, you could take a hard right or a hard left and cut through little parts of the desert. It's vast. It's open. You don't have to go through that intersection if you don't want to. You can go right through parts of the land and avoid some of these places. So again, we know at 127, he's at the front door. We know by 229, the app has disconnected to her watch. We have a timetable. There's no way at this point, after 80 days, they can't pinpoint 1 mile away in that circumference and not catch him somehow. And I think with all the planning, he avoided those cameras.
You know, he avoided those cameras, Cheryl. I hear what you're saying, but it's also a non sequitur. It doesn't make sense. If he did all that camera avoidance, then how come he didn't know the camera on her front porch worked?
I don't think he cared because, again, he's not in a hurry. He knows he's completely covered. He knows there's no connection to her. They don't know who he is. She doesn't know who he is. Again, after 80 days, we don't know who he is. So he didn't have a jammer. Otherwise, he wouldn't be acting like he did. I don't believe he had an accomplice. If he did, why is he the only one caught on video over multiple days and multiple times? Why is he the only one we see dressed the same? And the only thing that changes on the 30th, he now has a weapon and a backpack. He came mission ready on that day. He was ready that day. The days before, casing the joint, laying out his plan.
Let's look in depth at the route Annie Guthrie identified as the killer's route. Let's start with Lulu Walker Elementary School. First out to you, Brian Fitzgibbons. Take a look at that. You know they've got to have cameras. On the map is to the far left. See that? It's on the frontage. In other words, it faces the street. They have got to have cameras all over. What do you make of it?
Yeah, and this map was provided by Annie Guthrie out to the public in an effort to generate video tips, right? To identify a route and say, hey, any private residences and individuals that may have captured video, send this in right away. Now, to your point about the elementary school, we've got public locations like a school, library, and then you have private businesses along that route. Pharmacies, gas stations, things like that, that undoubtedly captured video at that time. And I think we've talked a lot about a lot of the missteps here. Getting this route information out was not one of them. This would help generate those leads and help people to save that video before it expired.
Joe Scott, there is a plethora of information. Look at the elementary school. What do you see?
Well, I can see 4 points, or at least probably multiple, more than 4 points of where cameras could be positioned. And it's going to have a field of visual perspective. Here's the thing. When you take a look at this and these cameras, if they're working, and we've run into that before, have we not? On each corner of the building, these cameras, their field of view will be intersecting. Okay, so if you think about the vision that a camera has, as it goes out, it kind of expands, right? So each one of these points will intersect with the other. The cool thing about this, let's just say from the perspective of the school, that these things are going to be overlapping. All right, they're going to overlap, and you can catch. If you can't catch it from one, you can catch it from the other. I'm talking about the color description of the vehicle, and in addition to that, you might be able to get a hit on a license plate relative to all of this. So these fields of view, if you will, are intersecting or overlapping of one another. And this is on obviously a main thoroughfare here. We're talking about a school, right? So parents are coming and going, throughout the day. They're going to have a circle, that you have to pass through, drop these kids off. And nowadays, with the way schools are, security is at the top of their list. So hopefully these cameras are all functioning. Hopefully they're sensitive enough to pick up on any critical data.
I got something for you, everybody. Green Toes North Nail Salon and Massage. Take a look to the right of the building. Right in front. Surveillance camera. Right in front, Cheryl McCollum.
That's the first thing that I saw, Nancy, when you sent the picture. Not only is it right in the front, it would capture the parking lot and the roadway. So again, my question becomes, why don't we have the car? If this is the route that he took, we would know the time that the app separated from the pacemaker, that the approximate time that he would be passing through there. Again, you're talking about 2 in the morning, 2:30, 3 a.m. There's not going to be that many vehicles. I don't understand how we don't already have it. My other question becomes, why does Annie Guthrie believe this is the route, and where does she think they were going? Those are key questions for me that I don't know the answer to yet. But again, you pass more cameras than you know every day. ATMs have cameras. Buses have cameras. I mean, you're on camera more than you think you are, but after 80-something days, we don't have this guy.
Summertime expenses stacking up fast. For many, the only option is swiping that credit card, leaving you trapped in a cycle of high-interest debt. But go to American Finances. Talk to them. They look at your current debt and can show you how your home equity can work for you. Imagine rolling that high-interest debt into one very manageable monthly payment. No upfront fees, zero pressure from salary-based consultants. Why is that important? Because they're not on a contingency fee. They're not salespeople that are going to get a cut if they sell you their services. On average, their customers are saving $800 a month. Not $800 in all, $800 a month. Start today, and you might be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. American Financing, America's home for home loans. 866-888-0344. 866-888-0344. Or simply go online to americanfinancing.net/Nancy. americanfinancing.net/Nancy. And good luck. Tonight is the killer's route to Nancy Guthrie's home revealed. I've got a big question to you, Brian Fitzgibbons. This information is coming from Savannah's sister, Annie Guthrie, reportedly. Mrs. Guthrie's daughter, obviously. Why is it so often that trained investigators discount civilian theories? And I always go back to an incredible example. It's the case of Gabby Petito. Gabby missing. Nobody knows where Gabby is. Her parents are distraught. They're frantic. They're in a panic. They can't get any cooperation from Brian Laundrie's family, who's staying quiet. They know that Gabby Petito did not come back from a cross-country trip with her fiance, Brian Laundrie. They know she's missing. He's in her Ford Transit. Where is she? If it had not been for civilian sleuths that spot her Ford Transit in the middle of dispersed camping, you know what that is? We're campers. It means there are no lights, there are no electric hookups, there's no porta potties, there's nothing. You're out there with the antelopes, you and the crickets. If they had not spotted her Ford Transit and said, hey, that looks like Gabby Petito's Transit, and they call police, and not far from there, what was left of her remains were found. Why is it law enforcement so often discounts civilian tips like what Annie has provided?
Yeah, there's an inherent bias with a number of investigators based on their experience. They look at somebody from the public, is from a family member, and they see a lot of emotion there, and they immediately discount what's being said. Now, I'll call back right to the beginning of this investigation. Annie Guthrie was in the house telling investigators there is no chance that that Mrs. Guthrie wandered off, that she's unable to walk more than 50 yards on her own power. And they were still, in the immediate sense, treating it as an elderly person wandering off. So, hey, this comes to missed opportunities, right? No investigator, no investigative agency is going to be perfect. However, there have been some big missteps here with not listening to the family and, might I say, some of these tips from the public.
Cheryl McCollum, you are a crime scene investigator. In my cases that I prosecuted, those are the first people I listen to. It's the family and what input they have in a case. Here, for whatever reason, you're wondering why. You know what? At some point, Cheryl, why ask why? Just accept that Annie Guthrie believes this is the route the killer took and run with it. Why is it law enforcement is so resistant to civilian or family input?
I think in this case, you have to listen to her. Nothing else has panned out. And to me, you're at that scene, Nancy. If this was you and I standing inside that house, we don't even have to listen to Annie. You're looking over there. Her eyeglasses are there. Her cell phone is there. Her hearing aids are there. Her walker is there. Her shoes are there. This woman didn't leave on her own. It's clear she did not. So if you've got her child telling you, I think this is the route, you need to check it out anyway. From her home, that driveway, you can only go left or right. Once you get to a major intersection to the left and one to the right, at that point, if you do not have that killer's car on video, then pay attention to what her daughter's telling you. You got to check it out. You have to check out all routes. You have to check out all cameras. Even if we thought that the kidnapper went to the right, I'm going to go to the houses to the left because, again, Nancy, he cased the joint. He looked at all the homes. He looked at where he could park and hide and then go to her house and be unseen the entire time. No neighbor, again, has produced the vehicle. We have him. He's been caught on camera more than once at the front door, but not from a neighbor.
Take a look now at Circa 79 Salon. It has just been renovated. I'm going to show you now the before shot. Before it was renovated, it was called Chantilly Tea Room, and it was transitioned into Circa 79. To Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter, as we're taking a look at the Circa 79 Salon, formerly Chantilly Tea Room, the fact that it was renovated is important. I'm going to get to that. You heard Cheryl McCollum say, why did Annie think this is the route? You know what? Why ask why? Again, she thinks it's the route based on what she knows. So I'm running with it. And I'm not just looking for the perp. I'm looking for his vehicle. And not just the day of the kidnapping, other days like January 11. So why do we believe, if we know, why did Annie choose this route as the likely route the killer took?
Nancy, we don't know specifically why, but this was Annie Guthrie in the first days of the investigation, and she's trying to help. Her mom is missing. She's in a panic mode of helping. She's not getting any feedback, leading her to believe that she's getting the result she's after, which is, where's my mom? So she actually volunteers. Here's where, because, she lives in the area. Annie Guthrie and Tommaso don't live that far from Nancy Guthrie's home. And so she knows all of the routes. She knows the roads that people go and drive on. And that's why she put it out there. And I agree with you. More than just a Joe Blow citizen, calling this in. This is the daughter of the victim, and she's putting this out there as a possibility. Now, this is a very specific getaway route. And it's easy to follow right there on the map. So when you get down to the nitty gritty, Nancy, this was Annie trying to help.
Okay. Bottom line, there was a lot of words to say, we don't know. But thank you anyway. Let's take a look at Chantilly Tea Room. That is what Circa 79 was before it was remodeled. It's a big structure over 3,000 feet. But What's interesting to me, it was remodeled by retail specialists with Cushman Wakefield. Why do I care? Because if it was remodeled recently, Cheryl McCollum, that tells me they've got surveillance cameras.
Possibly. What concerns me with any remodel is the cameras are going to be, taken apart. They're going to be rewired. So for a period of time, they won't have any. And it's probably the last thing they're going to put back together. So again, I'm not asking why, the reason that you're thinking. I'm asking why for the investigation. If this pans out and we know the direction they're going, then we know where they're probably taking her. Now we know where better to search. Again, Nancy, I have not seen a legitimate search, meaning let's get some volunteers out there. Let's go shoulder to shoulder. Let's pan out. Let's get some horses and ATVs. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen a call for a search from Savannah Guthrie. She could have gotten 5,000 volunteers out there. It hasn't happened. So either law enforcement doesn't think this has anything to do with an escape route, or they're ignoring vital evidence. But I'll tell you, I wish we had the 911 call. I wish we had the first thing they said. I think that would help us determine, who did they suspect first? What did they say first? I think that would help us.
Joe Scott Morgan, jump in.
Yeah, so if we look at these 2 points, Green Toes and the Circa 79 Salon, as it's entitled on the map, guess what you have to do there, Nancy? You have to slow down because this intersects with a major thoroughfare. The critical point is that if there is a stoplight, if there is at those 2 points alone, a stoplight, a stop sign, the individual driving this route, driving that vehicle will have at least had to do a pause. Some people refer to it as a California roll, right? Where you come in, you don't completely stop, and then you go ahead and go. It's not like this vehicle at those 2 spots would blast past it. Past these locations. We go back to Coburger, we think about that 20-mile circle or whatever it was where they're catching these glimpses. That ain't happening here. That individual would have to slow that vehicle down to the point where you can actually capture something. And if there are any more of these kind of intersections along the way, those are going to be critical points, all right, of where the individual would have had to slow down enough where you can actually get a capture off of these cameras. I think that those are going to be very important points. I'm glad that you pointed these out because, look, I mean, you got nothing else to go on. If you look at the elementary school, yeah, it makes kind of a dogleg turn there, but did that stop there, or are they just kind of rolling past it? These other places, you've got intersections with a major thoroughfare. They're going to have to slow at least. They're just thinking about their own preservation. They don't want to get T-boned as they're pulling out there. It's just human nature. They're going to have to slow down. That could be a critical point or critical points right there.
And amazingly tonight, Dave Mack has done his own investigation into the route that Annie Guthrie provided and learned something very, very probative. What about it, Dave?
Nancy, remember we had the car that was seen on a Ring camera that was about 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, and it was on a back road away from the scene. It was dismissed by the police or the sheriff's department. When I laid that map over, the route on that road does not show up on Annie Guthrie's route for getting away from the scene. But you lay it over and it's right in there. It fits as a possible route that could have been used as the escape route. It's right in the same general area.
And that may answer Cheryl's question as to why Annie came up with this route. That video from our friends at Fox News. You're on cross-examination. Who is our next sponsor? Well, here is a probative clue. Meow. Smalls makes fresh, human-grade food designed for cats to thrive, while Big Pet Food uses cheap filler. Smalls features 80% animal protein and zero artificial junk. 88% of cat parents report better digestion, softer fur, and more energy for their cats to play. It's a healthy investment your cat will love. if you want to invest in your cat's health, Smalls is giving you 60% off your cat's first order. 60% off plus free shipping and free treats for life when you go to smalls.com/Nancy, SMALLS, smalls.com/Nancy. 60% off your first order, free shipping, and free treats for life when you head to smalls.com/Nancy. Thanks, Smalls, and thank you from our cat, Cinnamon. And tonight, another theory emerges by a renowned psychologist. Do you buy it? Listen.
Of intelligence involved here, which has pointed to me for a very long while now, to a group of people, at least two. There is someone behind the curtain who's more intelligent, more scheming, and then the individual who actually carries it out. Because one of the prime reasons for eliminating a person other than financial is that they know something.
That is our friend, Dr. Gary Bricado. He's an esteemed psychologist, and that is him from a hit on TMZ, our friend's Harvey Levin. As much as I think of Bricado, I'm not buying that she was kidnapped or killed somewhere else, and the killer went back to the scene to put her blood on the porch and open and shut the doors. I mean, we have her heart monitor, her pacemaker, placing her there that night. So, Joe Scott Morgan, what do you make of this theory that there's some motive we don't understand, that nobody understands, that she was taken and killed elsewhere, and the perp goes back to the scene to stage, including putting her blood on the front porch?
So the killer, just so that I understand this, actually had the foreknowledge to show up and not just stage the blood, but also deposit expirate there. And what I mean by that is you've got blood that is being blown out of the nose and the mouth. And I'm going to stand by that. There's a close-up. You look at the top right, that cluster, right in there. In that tile space right there, you see those big depositions that are like the size of a nickel, perhaps, those tiny depositions. Nancy, the only way you get that, I mean, I guess the person could have showed up with a turkey baster, maybe drawn up some blood and kind of blasted it out, and then allowed gravitational blood droplets, which would be the nickel-sized stuff, but those tiny little droplets. And let me set the record straight. That's not aspirate.
Put him up, please.
It's expirate. So what that means is that the blood is actually
You do
blown
hear
out
yourself,
of the nose.
right? The killer came back with a turkey baster full of Nancy Guthrie's blood. Okay. I don't usually cut your mic, but I am sorely tempted. Move forward.
No, listen, it's implausible. The physical science, just looking at those images, by the way, that were generated from a member of the media that walked up and took those pictures because the scene was unsecured. That deposition right there flies in the face of that, Nancy. It really does. And I cannot imagine that whoever this rocket scientist is that did this had the foreknowledge to come in and set this up and stage it up. Because that expert up there,
you know,
that's
Joe
not
Scott, while
aspirate.
I've got you, a lot of viewers have questioned the fact that, these photos are from our friends at Fox News, by the way. A lot of viewers have questioned foliage being on top of the blood, which could have happened in any number of ways. But could you weigh in on that before I go to our other guests?
Yeah, because you have to, it's just basic physical science. If you have the blood deposition right there, how in the world did the greenery get on top of the blood? I've actually heard people say, well, there's evidence that there are bits of foliage with blood deposited on top of it. So I think that that's going to be a big question here. And again, hey, Nancy, guess what? We don't know because the scene wasn't secured. These images that you're seeing do not come from the police. All right. You've had pizza delivery guys, pool boys.
Okay,
Who
you're
else?
going down the garden path. You're way out in the weeds. Let's get it back in the middle of the road. You don't think that theory works, right? That's what I'm talking about.
No, I don't think it works. Absolutely not.
I mean, you had to really do a backflip and involve a turkey baster to make that theory work. Okay, Cheryl McCollum, what about it? And, Bricado, really smart guy. I don't know where this theory came from. What do you make of it?
If you look at the 90-degree angle drops, some of them are clear in the center or have a half moon. The only way that happens is if they have air. That comes from the nose or the mouth, period. You could not take blood, transfer it, drop it, and have it have that same conclusion. How does the foliage get on top of the blood? That's easy. We see him on video placing that flower clump on top of the camera. At some point, they fell off. That's easy.
Okay, to you, Brian Fitzgibbons, you have gone all around the world finding missing people. I've got a lot of questions for you about Sonora, Mexico, but if you could weigh in on what Bricado said, and again, he is no idiot, but this theory that she was kidnapped or killed in another location and the perp came back to stage the scene to make us think it happened there, it flies in the face of all the physical evidence. You've got to follow the physical evidence, like the blood, like the pacemaker.
I'll defer to Cheryl McCollum and Joe Scott on the forensic side, but what I'll add is someone like Dr. Bricado provides such supporting fires for someone like me in the field. And I'll explain this. An investigator can get locked into a certain hypothesis, a certain theory, right? And where you bring in somebody like Dr. Bricado to present these potential hypotheses, yeah, maybe the forensic evidence shoots it down quickly. Maybe it takes a day or two to shoot it down, but it gives another angle for the investigation to look at. And sometimes that creates a breakthrough, right? Because I can say for myself, sometimes I'll get locked into one hypothesis or theory versus another. And someone like that presenting, hey, there's someone controlling this from afar, 1 foot soldier on the ground executing the abduction, right? These are things that might get missed.
And we
on the
know
ground
tonight that, quote, fresh eyes have been brought in, Fitzgibbons, to take a fresh look at the evidence all over again. And I got to tell you something, Fitz. I'd be stuck in my office at the district attorney's office in downtown Atlanta, and it'd be 8 o'clock at night. I'd be looking at the same thing over and over. And then my investigator, Ernest, we were together over 10 years, only had one fight in 10 years over that POS O.J. Simpson. That said, he'd walk in, say, why are you still here? And I'd tell him, and he would say just out of the blue, well, what about X? He was coming from a different point of view, something fresh. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's what's happening tonight, we're told.
100%. And that's where, a talented individual like Dr. Bricado, hey, Babe Ruth struck out a number of times at home plate, right? He also hit a lot of home runs. So, that's where that experience and brain power comes into play in investigation.
And tonight to Dave Mack, apparently Sheriff Nanos, the sheriff in Pima County, is in, quote, uncharted career territory. A 10-day deadline has run out. He's in hot water yet again. Dave Mack, is this anything like when you get a skunk at a softball game when the other side just doesn't show up? In other words, doesn't sufficiently hand in the filing so the other side wins?
A lot like that, Nancy. In reality, Nanos was given 10 days to turn in a response to the questions the council had. And what he did was he basically sat down with his lawyer and wrote up excuses for things, but it wasn't under oath. So he turned in basically an undocumented list of excuses for his behavior and the things that he had said, but not under oath. And now the council's having to determine moving forward with his entire future. We told him to do this, but he did that instead. So they're having to make a decision on whether or not they actually pull him back in, put him under oath, and go through this whole process all over again to discuss his previous accusations of lying and misusing his office during an election year.
Cheryl McCollum, don't you know that if they can get rid of him on a technicality, in other words, he didn't properly fill out these forms, he'll get the boot. Right, he'll be taking the pat and turner, pat the street and turn the corner. Bye.
And Nancy, that is only going to serve to hurt this investigation. Somebody would have to come in and they would have to start all over, go through every single thing. That would hamper the investigation, sadly. But let me tell you something. I don't think any of us on this panel has had all the confidence in the world in this sheriff. Statements like, your guess is as good as mine. When he says things like, oh, there's thousands of vehicles at that time of day. We all know that's not possible. You know, he is the one that said, oh, I believe she's still alive. Again, I don't think there's an expert out there that believes Nancy Guthrie is still alive. Nobody being held somewhere. So he's flip-flopped. He's given bad information. He's contradicted himself. There's not a lot of, trust in what he's doing. But anybody would hate to see all of this happening now. I feel for the family. The Guthrie family is not getting what they deserve in this investigation, period.
Oh, goodness, no. But to you, Joe Scott Morgan, I don't know that I agree if it would be such a bad thing for nanos to be replaced, even though it is midstream.
I don't think that it would be, but we have to look at this from let's take the 30,000-foot view on this, Nancy, and you know this better than anybody. What's this going to bode for the future of the investigation, and for, if they hook somebody up on this, what's it going to bode for that prosecution, perhaps? You know that the attorneys will have a field day with this. They'll say that there's, it's rife with incompetence, that you missed evidence, all these sorts of things. And isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how those things that you do at the beginning of any investigation are going to echo through time? And this case in and of itself is a benchmark for that. I got to tell you, Nancy, moving forward with this case, this is actually a case as a college professor that I will present for years to come, saying this is an example, kids, of what not to do. And here we are. We're still in the middle of it, and it just keeps getting more and more bizarre as we go down this road.
Fitz, after there have been a number of, to say it euphemistically, putting perfume on the pig, missteps, translation, screw-ups, is there a way to make a save on this case?
I think there is. There's been a tremendous amount of leads generated, a tremendous amount of digital evidence. And it's important to remember here, there's a game clock on here. And the game clock for the public, 88 days. And for the Guthrie family, it's tremendously heartbreaking. But the FBI controls that game clock, not the perpetrator of this crime. And they have an unlimited amount of time and resources to go through this evidence and find who did this crime. Okay. So that's an important piece to remember here. I don't think hope is lost that justice can be served in this case.
Well, you just said something that is very encouraging, Brian Fitzgibbons. You mentioned the feds. If anybody can crack this case, it's them. But they need you. If you know, or even think you know anything about the disappearance of Mrs. Guthrie, dial toll-free 800-225-5324. Repeat, 800-225-5324. There is a $1.2+ million reward. And if you wish to remain anonymous, 520-882-7463. 520-882-7463. $1.2+ million on the table. And remember, a conviction not required, an arrest not required for you to get the reward.